Is it smart to buy expensive stocks? So the short answer is yes and no. How's that for an answer? It's really important that you avoid the wrong expensive stocks and then you back the truck up to the right expensive stocks. So let's get into figuring out the difference between the two. Okay, so should you buy or is it smart to buy expensive stocks? Now, I have 3 points I want to make. And once you know these 3 points, you're going to have a level of clarity that you did not have before. Okay, now here are the 3 points. Number 1 is when someone asks, is it smart to buy an expensive stock? The first thing you should think of is expensive to whom? So we first have to talk about what does expensive actually mean? That's the first point. I'm going to make a really strong point that valuation or that framing of expensive is a very 1980s approach. The second thing we're going to talk about is who taught you to think in expensive or cheap? Someone taught you that framing of expensive or cheap, and it is the wrong frame to use. And that is a very expensive frame to use, and we're going to talk about that. And the third thing is, let's just go with expensive for a second, and let's just answer that question cleanly. And we're going to answer, okay, well, is it smart to buy expensive? So we're going to look at this in 3 different ways. So here we go. Number 1. This idea of expensive or cheap, that's a valuation call, right? Is it dumb to buy cheap stocks? Is it smart to buy expensive stocks? So let's change the word stock out and first say, which piece of artwork do you want to buy? The one that's really expensive and that goes up every year and over 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it gets more and more expensive? Or do you want to buy the piece of art that is getting cheaper and cheaper over time? So the answer is simple. There's something going on with that piece of artwork that is getting more and more expensive over time. So we need to just change the word expensive, right? Because that's a valuation term. And let's just talk about price. Should you buy something? Is it smart to buy a symbol when the price keeps going higher? Now that's a very different question. I actually think it's a better question. But in answering this, is it smart to buy an expensive stock? Cut the valuation out of it and think more of price. Do you want to buy a stock? Do you want to buy a symbol where the price is going up? Just replace that with expensive. And the answer hopefully is, yeah, because that's the only way I can make money. Now you may have issues. When's it going to fall? You get this investment vertigo, like, oh, it's going up and it's going to fall. Who taught you it's going to fall? Like there's all these pieces of noise and junk that goes on in our head. So the first thing I just want you really to think about is this idea of valuation or price. My suggestion is you go with price. And I'll leave this point with one more thing. In July 97, the valuation of the US stock market was at 1929 highs, the highest valuation it had ever been at, except 1929. Well, for the next 2.5 years, the market marched higher. And depending on which market you looked at, the NASDAQ 100 or the S&P 500, people made a killing in the last 2.5 years. So looking at valuation is just a very 1980s approach. Yeah, valuation is high, but based on what? What's the interest rate for a high valuation? What if interest rates are 0? What if the yield on the 10-year treasury is 1% and not 9%? Nothing lives in a vacuum. But what's most important, and this is just point 1, go with price over valuation. Okay, number 2, and I'm going to get to the actual answering of the question, which is it smart to buy an expensive stock? I'm going to finish that with point number 3. The second thing is, who taught you this expensive, cheap thing, right? There's no such thing as expensive. Amazon, which is up a gazillion %, that's an economic term, is up an insane amount, and it's always been expensive. It's always been an expensive stock. GE, during the exact same 20-year time period, has been a cheap stock. Now, I'm using extreme examples here to prove a point. Thinking expensive or cheap is an expensive way of thinking. Now, I know there's things called growth stocks and value stocks. That's code for stocks that are crushing it and going higher, and stocks that have been forgotten. Value stocks eventually don't become value stocks, they become growth stocks because they've grown so much. So what I want you to think about is who is teaching you these frameworks, because this is a framework of thinking of what's cheap, what's expensive. I'd rather have you think what is trending higher, what is not. And that's a much more powerful question, right? Because then if we change the question to, is it smart to buy an uptrending stock? Or is it smart to buy an uptrending stock that's been trending up for 5 years? I would say yes, something's really working, because when price is going higher and higher and higher and higher, that means that company has really figured out a lot of things. Yes, there's going to be outliers like GameStop that goes from $4 to $500. All right, I'm talking generally speaking for the 99% of all the symbols out there. Okay, and then the third part, let's just talk about the question itself. Is it smart to buy an expensive stock? I would say absolutely, right? Now, I want to immediately go to, we got to look at price. We've got to look at price chart. You want to look at price chart. You want to look at a price chart. But if something is getting more and more expensive, I go back to the art metaphor, that there's a reason why people are wanting to pay more and more for it. This question's asked a bit in a vacuum, right? We haven't talked about trailing stop losses. We haven't talked about strategy. We haven't talked about portfolio structure. We haven't talked about, is it more expensive than the market? Is it expensive but less expensive than the market? Is it expensive and more expensive than the market but less expensive than everything in its sector? I'm putting these out there simply to go, wait, we live in a relative world. So asking yourself, is something expensive or not, is the wrong question to ask. But in the art of sticking with the question, is it smart to buy an expensive stock? We have to presuppose some things. It's expensive for a reason. It's going higher for a reason. There's things that are working. And also, I've mentioned this too in point 2 and point 1. Expensive to what? Expensive to what? You want to buy things that are working, and that means they're trending higher and they're moving higher. You want to find those things that have stability. So it's not, $10 to 30 to 15 to 40 to 20. Like, that is a crazy ride that maybe a 22-year-old can handle, but most people don't want that price volatility. So is it smart to buy an expensive stock? It depends. Expensive to whom? Expensive relative to what else? But in answering this question, looking at these 3 ways that I'm answering this question, I want you to think price over valuation. That was the first thing. The second thing, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, think of art. It just keeps going higher. But the second part is, who taught you to think expensive or cheap or fairly valued? And the answer almost always will probably be a big box advisor, right? Which gets back to point number 1. I want you to buy price direction, right? And so you want to start to learn and be taught how to understand price direction, because it's really the only thing that grows your portfolio. And then lastly, is it smart to buy expensive? And it's a hard question to answer, because expensive to whom, expensive to relative what? I want you to buy uptrending symbols, whether that's a bond symbol, a stock symbol, a commodity symbol, a crypto symbol. Things going higher makes your portfolio better. Thanks, guys. And if you like this video, you're absolutely going to love my free, absolutely free course called Clarity and Control. The 2 things people have asked for over the 2+ decades of me coaching people is they say, I want the clarity. I want clarity around my money. I want clarity around my investing. I want clarity around my training. I want this level of clarity that I have in other areas of my life, and they don't have it. And so I have a course that it's absolutely free, 4 awesome videos that show you exactly how to create the clarity that I think you've been looking for, even if you've been looking for it for 10 or 20 years. The other thing the Clarity and Control course is going to show you is how to get control back over this part of your life. Again, this is someone who is brand new, a year in, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in. This is information you won't find anywhere else. Clarity and Control, you can find it in the description. It is absolutely free. Go check it out. Let me know what you think about it. Thanks, guys, and I will see you on the next video. Okay, bye.